was going on in the UK, in the USA, and with scenes like this of police brutality against things, it really put it into perspective, the problem of racism. It was, and not only this, Martin Luther King also based a lot of his methods on the principles that were held closely by the white people: Christianity, democracy, freedom. These main things that were held so fundamentally not only showed how vicious racism was, but it also showed the senseless, nonsensical contradiction that the white people were advocating. But that's it, you know, it's had a massive thing and a massive impact over the years. And in modern America, you'd say Martin Luther King's legacy has almost abolished racism, and this would be that would be the ultimate tribute to it. The idea of a black president of the United States suggests that in the 19th century, and people would laugh in your face and probably try to hang you. But we've got to ask ourselves, is racism in America really dead? Hello there. You get the conspiracy theorists such as Michael Moore, etc., who will suggest, you know, that racism is still prevalent, and there's evidence of it. I mean, in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, the white people were evacuated and the black people in the slums were virtually abandoned. What you type in black refugees to do with Katrina, nothing will come up. There was a mass censorship of the fact that the black people in New Orleans were completely abandoned. And a lot of the refugees got sent to refugee camps that were not a million miles away from concentration camps in Nazi Germany. It's armed guards, you're fenced in, they can't leave, and no recording equipment is allowed in. But then again, that would come to the idea that this is the Republican Party, which, you know, everyone associates with this kind of mentality. But you've got to ask yourself, is that too much? Is the fact that we've got Obama going for president?
I took like an opposite view. I chose Malcolm X, which is obviously, people might be aware, was more a violent approach. But I was interested generally in the civil rights movement, and Malcolm X, who sort of took a more aggressive approach. Like Max said, whereas Martin Luther King was like a pacifist approach, Malcolm X was more aggressive. And the difference between the two was, I think anyway, and what most people have argued, was the way they'd both been brought up. And Martin Luther King was from, you know, not a wealthy background, but middle class background, you know, a very loving family. Whereas Malcolm X was subject to quite a lot of violence from early on. His grandmother was raped, his father was murdered. So under the current social order, you suggest that he was brought up, you know, hating the situation that was under, where the whites were dominant. So, but during his time, there was the Ku Klux Klan, who obviously preached violence toward the whites, and basically he was brought up hating really the whites because of what has shaped his childhood effectively. A bit about Malcolm X was historian Kelly wrote that he's been called many things: a Pan-Africanist, a father of black power, a religious fanatic, a closet conservative, an incipient socialist, and a menace to society. The meaning of his public life, his politics and his ideology is contested in part because his entire body of work consists of a few dozen speeches. But like I've already said, his early childhood was, you know, the experience that he had from his early childhood shaped the movement, his role in the civil rights movement. Because his childhood was quite badly affected, he took an aggressive approach. You know, there you can see some of his family members. Next is school life, and he went to a mixed school, so therefore he suffered a lot of discrimination by the teachers and the pupils themselves. So it come to a stage where he just left school. So basically then he started slipping deeper and deeper. So obviously there's no education, and he was sort of slipping into like the underworld, like, you know, like, so he was robbing, thieving, doing stuff like that. And he teamed up with a pimp called Shorty, and they become armed thieves, encountering close calls by the police. He made some dangerous enemies, and the police showed signs of suspicion right throughout his younger childhood. His life of crime halted after being caught in a jewellery robbery, where Malcolm and Shorty were sentenced to 10 years imprisonment, civil rights no matter what, or when he insisted, because of this, he insisted it was his duty to help. You know, obviously at the time, like Mac was saying, it was huge divide between the whites and the blacks. You know, Malcolm, unlike Martin, offered a more violent approach. As you'll see later in the slide, he says quotes that suggest that violence only makes change. You know, the pacifist approach of Gandhi, which Martin Luther King was heavily influenced by. Malcolm thought, you know, it had to be violent to make a change because the police were violent towards the black, and by not doing it, it just seemed that the whites were just dominating the black continually. So by, you know, bringing back an aggressive approach, and then he thought that he would eventually make change. But going back to Martin Luther King, even though at the start they didn't hate each other, but they both thought each other's methods was completely, you know, wrong. They didn't like each other. But towards the end, both realised that it could be used, both of their methods could be used. So Malcolm incorporated that peaceful directed action can be incorporated, and Martin towards the end thought that direct action could be used as long as it was controlled, so it weren't completely out of the question. There you got a few quotes where generally, you know, he's saying that he wants a brotherhood, which is basically a community, but people like the whites don't want to join him, you know. And this next one here is saying again about anger, how it can bring about change. Then I'm going to go to the assassination of him.
To do man on the current Iraq War. The ongoing conflict, which has been named the Iraq War or Second Gulf War, began on the 20th of March 2003. The invasion was led by the United States and supported by multinational coalitions consisting of the US, the UK troops, supported by smaller troops from Australia, Denmark, Poland and other nations. The main reason for going to war was claims by US officials that Iraq under Saddam Hussein was producing weapons of mass destruction. Also, another reason was that Saddam Hussein was a dictator and the USA and the UK felt that he needed to withdraw from his political power due to his oppression, etc., that he has put his people through. At the start of the war, US officials argued that Iraq was producing weapons of mass destruction, which would pose an immediate threat to the security and interest of the United States, Europe and other nations of the Middle East. This intelligence was supported by British intelligence. Furthermore, Russian intelligence linked with Iraq terrorism, and Germany gave intelligence assistance in preparation of the war. However, the intelligence, especially concerning weapons of mass destruction, received criticisms, and weapons inspectors found no evidence of weapons of mass destruction after the invasion. The Iraq Survey Group concluded that Iraq had ended its weapons of mass destruction programs in 1991 and had no active programs at the time of the invasion, but they intended to resume production academic on from the 3rd of January and the 12th of April 2003. 36 million across the globe took part in almost 3,000 protests against the war in Iraq, the demonstration on February 15, 2002 being the largest. In March 2003, UN weapons inspectors Hans Blix reported in reference to Iraq that no evidence of forbidden activities has been found so far, saying that progress was made in inspections which would continue. However, the US government announced that they would proceed in the coalition of allied countries named the Coalition of the Willing to get rid of the alleged weapons of mass destruction. The US government abruptly advised UN weapons inspectors to immediately pull out of Baghdad. There are also serious legal questions surrounding the behaviour of the war in Iraq and the Bush doctrine of preemptive war. On September 16, 2004, Kofi Annan, the Secretary General of the United Nations, said about the invasion, I have indicated it was not in conformity with the UN.
Right, when you're ready, please.
Right, well, my speech is basically on the American-Cuban relationship and the early relations between North America mainland and the Spanish colony of Cuba began in the early 18th century. Cuba became the main trader of legal and illegal tobacco and sugar production to the USA. During this period, Cuban